Hello everyone, so it is August 3rd and I have finished my first book for the month. It is Sanctuary by Alana Andrews. I'm so excited to be on my more normal rhythm of finishing books. I have a lot going right now and this is the first one I finished. This is a novella following a side character from the Kate Daniels series, and he is one of my favorite side characters. He's absolutely fantastic, and this little novella was so much fun. Now, I honestly haven't gotten to the point in my Kate Daniels reread where we've met him again, so my details on some of the things that were going on in here are a little rusty, and I noticed that as I went along, but it didn't affect my enjoyment because I really enjoyed this. I think I mostly just missed a few Easter eggs that are probably in here, so I'm excited to get the rest of the way through my Kate Daniels reread and then read this again. I just loved this. It was absolutely fantastic. I had a great time. I got emotional over it. This is like a little novella and I got super emotional over it at one point, but yeah, so this is the first book I finished. I'm giving it a 5 out of 5 stars. The audiobook was also fantastic. This wasn't arriving from Amazon, so I decided to borrow it on Hoopla and listen to the audiobook, and then I also have this, and it was just fantastic all the way around. Really, the only complaint I have about this is I'm not sure when it is set. I would like to know where we are in the Kate Daniels universe, and I have an approximation, and I'm assuming that it takes place after the series, but I want to know for sure exactly where this takes place in the series and like in the timeline. So that's my only complaint, but 5 out of 5 stars, absolutely loved it. Hello, so I'm not sure if I talked about in my last clip where I was putting Sanctuary on the board, but I did end up putting it in the blue book cover spot because this does have blue on the cover. And then I've also finished Written in the Stars by Alexandria Bellafleur, and that's for another vlog. That's for my Can I Trust vlog with Bree, so I will have that link down below if you want to see my full thoughts. But this was a pretty good read for me, and it ended up in the middle spot of LGBTQIA+ author. So I wanted to update you on that, and then I also have watched a baseball game. I also watched a baseball game this month, and I spent like an evening watching a baseball game. So instead of just having it on like I normally do, I decided to turn off the Olympics and I turned on a baseball game and intentionally watched it. So I'm happy with that, since, you know, there are a lot of evenings that I just have it on as background noise, but I spent some time actually watching baseball, enjoying it, and kind of getting invested in the game, which is not always my evening routine. So we have 3 check marks done, and it is currently August 7th, so I am thrilled. I have way too many books on the go at this point. I think I have like nearly 10 started right now, and it is way too much for me. So I have a goal to get as many done by the end of the week as possible so that I can also finish some over the weekend, and we shall see how that goes. Hopefully you see a lot of updates from me in the next few days. Hello everyone, so it is past the end of August, it is the beginning of September, and I haven't updated this vlog since like I think the first week of August, and that's for a lot of reasons. I hit a pretty big life slump in the middle of this month. August, my job revolves around the school year, and this, like, the month of August is my most intense month of the year at work, like a lot of people whose jobs revolve around the school year. And this year in particular, it just hit me really hard, and I don't know why, but it just hit me in a way that I have not felt like reading. I haven't felt like vlogging or doing any of my content, and I think I kind of just decided to take a break in the last like 10 days of August, and I was planning on doing a TBR and everything this past weekend, but it just didn't happen. So I wanted to do a quick update on what I read in the second half of August and kind of tell you my books. And this is kind of going to look like my old wrap-ups rather than my wrap-ups that I've been trying to do with my bingo game So we're still going to fill out the bingo board and show you how that all worked, but this is just going to be all at once rather than like the vlog style updates I've been doing for the past few months. So I already talked about Sanctuary and Written in the Stars. I went back and looked at that footage. So those were the only 2 books that I think I talked about in the first half of the month. I did read a few more things. So the first 2 I'm going to talk about are Camp Damascus by Chuck Tingle. This is a horror book about Rose, who lives in a religious community in, I think, Montana, and they are associated with a conversion camp in that town. And Rose starts to like have a lot of questions about this camp and what goes on there. And the story kind of kicks off from there, and it's a wild ride, and I enjoyed this. I gave it a 4.25 stars. I thought it had a lot of really interesting discussions, and I had a good time reading it. I read Camp Damascus, and I tried to read Library of the Unwritten, both for the Can I Trust Bree vlog. So if you want my like full in-depth thoughts, you can check out that vlog, but I ended up DNFing this one. It was a tough time for me. Like, I think a lot of us in the vlog kind of struggled with this one, and for me personally, I really think it was just a slump problem. I'm considering holding on to this and trying it again at some point, but I'm not 100% sure. I just kind of felt like it was a me problem and not a book problem, but I did DNF this at the 30% mark. Then I read Funny Story, and actually I think this came before the Can I Trust Bree books in terms of like chronological order. This is Emily Henry's most recent release, which I read as part of my Can I Trust Emily Henry vlog, like author taste test vlog that I did earlier in the month. And I actually had been reading for that for 8 months, and this was the last one I wanted to read for the vlog, and I finished it up in August. So that was all more details are also in that vlog. You can tell I mostly read for content this month. I didn't get a lot of other reading in just simply because of my slump, like I said, but this was a 5-star, and this is kind of how the month went. I either DNF'd books or I loved them. It was basically like I couldn't be bothered with anything that wasn't really grabbing my attention and I was really vibing with. So this is the story of Daphne and Miles, who are 2 people who were each in a relationship. Daphne's fiance broke up with her and ended up dating his childhood best friend, who was Miles's partner, and the 2 of them just move in together as a sort of means to kind of get back on their feet, and then they get a wedding invitation from their previous partners and decide to go in order to kind of say why not. So that's where the story kicks off. I loved this. I had a really good time with it, gave it 5 stars, and can't wait to read more from Emily Henry. I think I have 2 left in her backlist, which I might try at some point, but I'm definitely going to be trying her books going forward as well. Then I read Bury Your Gaze by Chuck Tingle, and I read both of these books because of Bree, but both in August. It's just the way it all worked out. And this is the story of Misha, who is a writer in Hollywood. He has been writing this show for years, and he's finally going to put his queer characters in a relationship together, and he's really excited about this because this has like been his goal for a long time. But unfortunately, the execs in the higher ups want to kill off his characters, and when he balks at this, he starts seeing characters from his horror movies come to life and start spending time in his life, or like interrupting his life, I guess is how I should say that. So this is a really interesting story. I had a great time reading it. It really had a lot of really good discussions about technology and Hollywood, as well as queer representation in media, and I loved it. I had a great time reading this, and I gave it a 4.5 star. I think with this and Camp Damascus, there was something in the like middle of the book where I sort of like just, the author lost my attention for like a little bit. I keep doing this hand motion. Tingle just like lost my attention at like the 60% mark in both of these books for like 10%, and then eventually he pulled me back in, but just like there's something about his writing style, I don't know if it goes on too long or there was something in the plot that it just sort of like each book, and I couldn't figure out why, it just lost me a little bit at that point. So I'm interested to see what he writes next and to see if that keeps happening, because it's sort of the only thing that's keeping me from giving these books 5 stars. And this is the first in the Peculiar Taste novella series. I have these in hardcover and I just simply don't know where I put the book. But this was the story of a sister of Medusa who is also a Gorgon, and it works as a mercenary, and then she ends up through her work having to be the sacrifice to open like the, I think, goblin market, some kind of market, magical market, and things kick off from there. But it is like a romantasy series and a romantasy novella, and I thought this was pretty good. I enjoyed the concept and I enjoyed the like storyline. I do think that the characters were a little bit, I don't want to say underdeveloped, but like I didn't love the characters quite as much as I wanted to, and I did think the whole thing got a little repetitive at the, you know, it's 150 pages, but we tried to get into too much, but then it ended up being repetitive, in my opinion. So I give this a 3-star, and I kind of had been reading it for a few weeks. Like I kept going back to it and reading things, reading it in between other books. So I actually didn't read this very quickly, so I think that kind of shows how my attention span was suffering, but also just it wasn't pulling me back in very much. But I will continue with these, and I'm very interested to see how the rest of the authors take on this, because I think they're interconnected, but they all have a different author. Then if you saw my video about my self-destruct books, you know that I DNF'd Circe by Madeline Miller. I had been hoping to hold off and read this during the Goddess Complex readathon, but when I realized that my self-destruct videos were overdue, I decided to try this out, hopefully, you know, being able to recommend it for the Goddess Complex readathon. And then I DNF'd it. This was not the first time I tried to read this book. I had tried to read it physically before, I had tried to read it on audio before, and I always kind of got about 20% in and just wasn't interested, and kept thinking that because so many people sang its praises, I was going to, you know, eventually be able to read it and enjoy it, and just thinking it wasn't time for me. But unfortunately, even though I love Song of Achilles, this one just wasn't for me, and I just think it's the storytelling style for this one. I just couldn't, I was just like waiting for something to happen, and for me, I need to really jump into the plot, especially when I'm feeling a little slumpy. So this one didn't work out, unfortunately. And then the last book of the month, and maybe my favorite thing I read this month, I'm not sure. I just had such a good time reading this that it's hard for anything else to like top it. And that is The Late Mrs. Willoughby by Claudia Gray. This is the second book in the Mr. Darcy and Miss Tinley mysteries, which the first book is The Murder of Mr. Wickham. And this is the story of, well, how do I say? I think the title gives it away. Mr. Willoughby's wife dies in a public and very tragic manner, and everyone is trying to figure out what happened. And Mr. Darcy, who is Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth's son, and Miss Tilney, who is the couple from Northanger Abbey's daughter, the two of them are once again thrown into the mix and interested in investigating this possible murder. I had a great time reading this, and part of the reason was because I ended up buddy reading this with Leander from the TBR0. We just had some really awesome discussions about this book and how the book kept us guessing the entire time, and I really think that helped me, like, as much as I wanted to keep reading this book, it also helped me with my slump a little bit, because I was reading such a good book and having a good time discussing it that it really, you know, kept me going through this. And I think I mentioned this about The Murder of Mr. Wickham, that I just love all the little nods to the original Austen works that are in here, and how many different things I just noticed that were just so perfect with this as far as nods to Austen. And then there's also just this great, like, concoction within the book of a historical mystery that is interesting and complex and kept us guessing, like I mentioned, but also a lot of character growth, a lot of character development, a really wonderful like group of characters that we get to see a little bit of like over and over again see them interact and their relationships develop, and the way Gray has created these friendships, relationships, etc. And also like the way she like viscerally brought out my like rage towards other characters and my frustration with them. So it was just really skillfully done, as well as really entertaining and wonderful. I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars, and I cannot wait to read the next book. But those are all of the books that I read in the month of August, and kind of how I was all over the place with my ratings and feelings. I am really hoping that September is a little bit better in terms of reading, and kind of just my will to read returns. I have an idea. Yesterday there's a couple of little books that usually always drag me out of a slump, and I always forget about them, and then I think I should reread that book, and then maybe my slump will be solved. So we're maybe gonna try that this week. But I am also participating in the Goddess Complex Readathon. I'm helping co-host that. Team Athena, if you still want to join us. But I'm also hoping to participate, at least casually, in the Mystic Falls Readathon, as well as the Slayerfest Readathon, and the Suffer-a-thon that Paige is running. So at least dipping my toes into these places, because they all sound great, so I couldn't say no to any of them. But I'm also currently not reading very much, so we'll see if I'm a good participant or if I kind of fall off the bandwagon, because unfortunately I basically signed up for Pick-Pong-a-thon, played for 2 weeks, and then completely disappeared off the map. So I'm sorry to my team for that. If you want a small update on my physical TBR progress, I am down to 81 books on my TBR shelf. I will put like what it was and then what it is, because I want to keep you guys updated on that each month as a kind of piece of accountability for me, and I always forget. But this month I had a bit of a moment where I was so slumpy, and I came home from work and I was like, I'm gonna get rid of some books that I'm not gonna read anytime soon. And I think I took like 10 or maybe more off, so Unhaul will be coming to you soon. Yeah, that is everything I want to talk about today. So if you have any thoughts or feelings or want to share anything about what I talked about today, please let me know down below. If you aren't feeling chatty and you just want to leave me a raccoon emoji, that's all I could think of in that moment. So a raccoon or some other type of woodland creature for like a fall vibe, let me know. But thank you so much for watching. I can't wait to see you again. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.